They thought they could scare a family with fake badges and cheap uniforms. But what they didn't know was that the husband they were about to cross was a retired Navy SEAL who had faced enemies far more dangerous than them. When those men laid their hands on his wife, they unleashed a storm they could never have imagined. This isn't just a story about HOA corruption, it's about what happens when you underestimate the wrong man. Before I dive into this unbelievable story, make sure you're subscribed so you never miss another HOA drama or revenge tale. Hit the like button if you love seeing justice served, and share this with anyone who enjoys watching arrogant people get exactly what they deserve. Now let's get into it. The story begins in a quiet suburban neighborhood that looked picture perfect on the outside. Green lawns, clean sidewalks, and a lake that shimmered in the sunlight. But behind the trimmed hedges and friendly waves, a toxic group had been slowly taking control. The HOA board, filled with entitled personalities who had appointed themselves guardians of the community, had been pushing their power far beyond its legal limits. And at the center of their intimidation campaign was a group of so-called security officers, men who wore tactical-style uniforms and claimed to be acting under HOA authority. They weren't real police, but they carried themselves as if they were, and their entire purpose was to make homeowners feel small, watched, and controlled. One family in particular drew their attention: Marcus and Alana Johnson. Marcus was a retired Navy SEAL, quiet and respectful, but always vigilant. His wife Alana was warm, strong-willed, and beloved by neighbors. The Johnsons had moved into the neighborhood to build a peaceful life for their kids after years of sacrifice and service. But for the HOA, they represented defiance. Marcus had refused to pay a bogus compliance fine that had no legal standing, and he had even questioned the legitimacy of the HOA's so-called security force. That single act of questioning their authority painted a target on his family. The fake cops started circling their home at night. Neighbors reported seeing them lurking by the Johnsons' driveway, shining flashlights into their windows. They claimed it was routine patrol, but everyone knew it was harassment. Marcus didn't react at first. He had learned long ago that reacting too early only gave your enemy the upper hand. But Alana was unnerved, especially when the men began following her car to the grocery store and parking outside the kids' school. Then one evening, while Marcus was away on a short trip, everything came to a head. Alana was walking back from her mailbox when the men approached her. They blocked her path, accusing her of trespassing on HOA property, an absurd claim since she was standing on her own driveway. When she tried to step around them, one of the men shoved her. Alana pushed back, demanding they move, and in response, another man struck her across the face. She fell to the ground, dazed and in pain, as the so-called officers laughed and told her this was what happened when people didn't obey HOA authority. They left her there bruised and humiliated, never realizing that their biggest mistake wasn't hitting her, it was thinking Marcus would let it go. When Marcus returned and saw the swelling on his wife's face, something inside him shifted. Years of military discipline kept him calm on the outside, but behind that calm was a storm. He wasn't just angry, he was calculating. He knew men like this, bullies who thought uniforms gave them power, and he knew exactly how to dismantle them. That night, Marcus didn't sleep. He watched the street from the shadows of his porch, waiting. When the fake cops returned, puffed up and cocky, Marcus stepped into their path. He didn't shout. He didn't argue. He simply moved with the same precision that had once made him the deadliest weapon in hostile war zones. Within seconds, the men were on the ground, disarmed, groaning, and utterly humiliated. It wasn't just a fight. It was a demonstration. Marcus had sent a message. You don't touch his family and walk away. But this was just the beginning. Because while the men were licking their wounds, Marcus was already plotting how to expose the entire HOA scam that had empowered them. He wasn't just going to defend his family, he was going to bring down the rotten system behind these fake cops. And as the sun rose the next morning, neighbors began whispering. The HOA's enforcers had finally met their match. The board thought they could cover it up, but Marcus was already 10 steps ahead. The war for control of the neighborhood had only just begun, and the HOA had no idea the battlefield they had stepped onto. Chapter 2. Picked up with the HOA board scrambling. The so-called security force, once seen as untouchable, had been humiliated in front of their own neighbors. Word spread quickly. Some cheered Marcus for standing up, while others whispered in fear, worried that retaliation was coming. The HOA board, however, doubled down. They couldn't allow Marcus to become a symbol of resistance. At their next closed-door meeting, they vowed to make an example out of him. What they didn't realize was that Marcus had spent years gathering intelligence in far more hostile situations. He began quietly documenting everything. He installed cameras around his property, recorded conversations with HOA members, and collected witness statements from neighbors who had also been harassed. Piece by piece, he built a case. Meanwhile, Alana, though still recovering from her bruises, refused to hide. She walked proudly through the neighborhood, her presence a reminder of the HOA's cruelty and Marcus's strength. This infuriated the fake cops even more. They attempted to confront Marcus directly, but every time they tried, he shut them down with an icy calm that made them nervous. He wasn't just a homeowner anymore. He was a force they couldn't intimidate. The tension escalated when the HOA tried to fine Marcus thousands of dollars for violence against HOA officers. They even threatened foreclosure, claiming he had violated community bylaws. But Marcus was ready. He had already contacted a lawyer who specialized in HOA abuse cases, and he had forwarded evidence to local authorities. What the board didn't know was that one of their own residents had also reached out to a local news station, tipping them off about the fake police force operating under the HOA's banner. By the time the story broke, the HOA was in panic mode. The board tried to claim the men were licensed security, but their paperwork was riddled with fraud. Background checks revealed that at least 2 of them had criminal records. The illusion of power was crumbling, and Marcus knew it was time to strike harder. But the board wasn't done yet. In desperation, they sent the fake cops back to Marcus's house one night, hoping to provoke him into an overreaction they could use against him. Instead, Marcus was ready with cameras rolling. The men threatened him on tape, tried to push past his gate, and even admitted they were ordered by the board. It was the final piece of evidence Marcus needed. As he uploaded the footage to social media and handed it over to authorities, the neighborhood exploded with outrage. The board's credibility was shattered. Neighbors who had once been silent now spoke out, emboldened by Marcus's stand. The HOA's empire of fear was collapsing from the inside. But Marcus knew better than to celebrate too early. Cornered enemies were always the most dangerous. And as the board prepared one final desperate move, Marcus prepared himself for the fight of his life, not on the battlefield, but in the courtroom where the HOA would try to use every trick in the book to escape justice. Chapter 3 unfolded inside a packed courtroom. The HOA board members sat smugly at their table, their lawyers ready to argue that Marcus had been violent and disruptive, while their fake cops were merely doing their jobs. But Marcus's legal team came armed with an avalanche of evidence. Video footage of the assaults, recordings of threats, fraudulent paperwork, criminal backgrounds, and witness testimony. It painted a damning picture. The judge listened as neighbor after neighbor described how the so-called HOA officers had harassed them. Parents spoke about being followed to school drop-offs. Elderly residents described being threatened with fines for leaving garden tools outside. The pattern was clear. The HOA had abused its power, and their fake cops had been nothing more than thugs in costume. When the footage of Alana being struck was played, the courtroom went silent. Even the HOA's lawyers looked shaken. The judge's expression hardened, and it was clear which way the tide had turned. Marcus didn't gloat. He simply sat quietly, his hand resting on Alana's as justice unfolded. In the end, the HOA board was stripped of authority. The fake security force was disbanded, and several members faced criminal charges. The judge ordered restitution to families who had been targeted and barred the HOA from ever hiring unlicensed security again. Marcus and Alana didn't just win for themselves, they won for the entire community. Neighbors approached them afterwards, some with tears in their eyes, thanking them for standing up when no one else could. The Johnsons' home, once under siege, became a symbol of resilience. Marcus had fought battles overseas, but this victory meant more than any medal. He had defended his family, his community, and exposed a corrupt system that thrived on fear. And as the HOA board members were led away in disgrace, Marcus knew one thing for certain. You can wear a uniform, you can flash a badge, but true authority isn't taken, it's earned. And when you abuse it, eventually justice will find you.